August 19th, 2021 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. I want to start out that if you are interested in speaking tonight, please get a card and fill that out and hand it to Mark so he can know who's going to speak, and he'll call upon you when the time comes. Also, please, if you haven't already, and if you picked up one of these agendas at the door, please pick that up and notice the Planning Commission meeting public comment protocol. We ask that you read over that, and please be kind to the people who you're talking about, and please, we ask that you limit your talk to about 5 minutes. We will be timing, actually. We do allow more time for the applicant because we need to gather information from that person, and we will ask questions of the applicant and of you, but we need a lot of more information from that person. But please read over the public comment protocol. And we will start with the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any changes?
I have a question.
Okay.
No.
He has a question.
Okay.
I guess we're gonna, part of this seems to bear also into what we just talked about there in the workshop, on the letter.
I'm not hearing you, Ed. I'm sorry. Let me get you.
Microphone's shifting.
There you go.
I just wanted to make sure we understood the relationship
Microphone over there.
of number 10
Yeah, number 10, yeah.
to what we just talked
Yeah,
about
that's
there in our workshop.
That's yours.
Oh, this is 9 now.
May be premature to deal with 10, frankly. It's up to you all, but
Well, I'm just raising the question, is that
I would like
still-
to discuss it because we can't do a Boeing Road corridor study until we've got something with our medium density and high density. And it can be relatively general
yeah.
in sense. We don't have to
Okay.
be nailing down the zoning ordinance
right.
now, but we kind of need to at least get a kind of a vision of what we want for medium density. Let's have a discussion tonight, and hopefully some of the residents here that are here will add into that discussion.
If we have any left.
But it's only for discussion tonight anyway.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure if there was any intent for that to
But the
count
staff
for
needs
that,
a
not-
consensus,
Yeah.
based upon our workshop tonight that we did, plus that discussion, to try to figure out where we're going to go with this.
I move for approval of the minute, of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Moving on to item number 2, approval of the minutes for the July 15th, 2021 meeting. Do we have any questions or changes with the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3, discussion and public hearing on a plan to replace a water line on a section of Thornton Drive in Thornton Heights subdivision, FUD applicant.
Yeah, this item basically involves replacement of an existing 6-inch PVC water line along part of Thornton Drive, basically from Concord Road all the way down Thornton to where it starts to curve and kind of due north toward Kingston Pike. You can kind of see it there on the screen. And replacing that with a new 6-inch ductile iron pipe. And First Utility District would be doing all the work. They would be boring actually a 2-inch HDPE water line across Concord Road to connect to the existing line. And really all this project is really being done for preventative maintenance for their water distribution system. So I think there's a representative here from First Utility if you have any questions. The staff does recommend approval of this utility project, subject to just coordinating erosion control and traffic control as part of the right-of-way permit, and then to provide the town with some kind of an as-built of the replacement line, just so that we know for future road projects or utility work that, you know, where the where the line is, so that we don't, damage it or have issues, conflict. So with that, if anybody has any questions, either myself or Edwin.
I have a question. So,
Are you going, question with him first or Mark?
question for
Okay.
first you two.
Okay, tell us who you are and give us an address of your business.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Edwin Deaton. I'm in the engineering department at First Utility District, 122 Durwood Road.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My engineering question. Thank you. You're going from the 6-inch to 2-inch back to the 6-inch. What's the rationale
We're
behind that?
replacing a 6-inch. It's an in-kind line replacement from Hewlin Drive coming back around to Concord. Currently at Concord, we have a dead-end line that does not interconnect on the west side of Concord. So we're eliminating that dead end and just boring a short line across to make a loop.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is why is it at 6-inch to a 6-inch? You go from 6-inch down to 2-inch and back to 6-inch.
Currently, this is, not to get too much in the weeds, this is currently a 1-street wide pressure zone. We have 1 street on 50 PSI lower pressure. So it's operated well and provided fire protection for a long time. We're going to replace that in kind, and we're eliminating the dead end simply just to not have to go back and do flushing and maintain chlorine in that line. So we're simply connecting it with the tube because that's all we need to do to eliminate the dead end. And it's quite a bit cheaper than boring a 12-inch steel casing across the road.
Sure thing. Understand.
Will water service be affected for a certain time for the residents in that area?
There will be scheduled outages just to swap the services over. So,
And they'll be-
the existing line will remain in service until the new line is tested and disinfected, and we're ready to transfer services individually for each customer.
And you'll be informing the customers of this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And you're abandoning the other line after you get the other one up and going?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And Edwin, you got to do new yokes and meters, or are you going to tie in to the old yokes and meters?
We will likely set new meters and boxes next to the old ones. These are
Those are, I was going to say, they've been there a long time.
60 years old, so we're going to go ahead and swap those over, and then we'll make the connection to the customer's existing service and pull the old box. And
That's the other thing I was going to get at. It may really confuse a homeowner when they have 2 boxes
Yeah.
in their yard.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, I think the ones we have now are old concrete, so we'll take those out, fill it
Okay.
with gravel, seed and straw it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Move to approve with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Number 4, discussion and public hearing on a plan to install underground communication conduit to provide fiber optic Comcast cable to the Farragut Primary, Intermediate, Middle, and High School. Fungum, McAdoo, and Associates applicant.
This project is basically involves installing a 2-inch HDPE communications conduit, Comcast conduit, to service the Knox County schools in the town. First area, the primary school is a pretty short section. They're extending it from Parkside Drive. They'll be boring under Campbell Station Road into the school property, primary school property. And then on the other property off of Kingston Pike and West End Avenue, they basically would be coming in from 11126 Kingston Pike, going west along the south side of Kingston Pike and boring under Kingston Pike, and then following the east side of West End Avenue up into the school property. There's a small section there that they're going to have to obtain additional easements, I believe, on part of West End Avenue. But most of the work will be conducted either within the right-of-way or existing standard utility easements until they get into the private property of the schools. So pretty straightforward project. The staff does recommend approval of this extension, subject to coordinating the erosion control and traffic control with the town's engineering staff as part of the right-of-way permit, and then the as-built, the conduit location, again, for future coordination purposes.
Does anybody have any questions of Mark? Applicant?
Yes, I'm Adam Duncan with Fulgen McInerney Associates, 10330 Hardin Valley Road.
Okay. Do you have any comments first before we ask questions?
No, ma'am.
Does anybody have any questions of either Mark or the applicant?
If you guys are providing, I assume obviously this is going into the schools, the Comcast service is going into the schools, but you're going up West End. Are they going to have, those business owners, are they going to have access to a new service as well?
They should have access to that. I would have to confirm that with Comcast, but generally speaking, once a fiber is pulled in through this conduit, if they can serve more than one customer on it, it's beneficial to them. So it wouldn't be isolated necessarily just to the schools.
Okay. That's all I had.
Just a little bit of a warning, when you guys cross Turkey Creek, you're going to attach the conduit to that bridge because there's really no cover over culvert. It's a concrete clear span bridge. That bridge occasionally, once every 5 or 10 years, goes underwater. So just think about during flood events how that conduit, you're going to be on the upstream side of it.
Yes, sir.
Shouldn't be an issue, but if all of a sudden you're down below the deck of the bridge, that conduit is going to get ripped off during a flood event.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be more prevalent in years to come because of silt buildup that's there now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Is most or all of this, you're boring underground as opposed to tearing up?
That's correct. The intention is to bore as much as possible.
Okay.
I noticed there's several areas where you're crossing crossing or are in proximity to gas lines. Do you have a reasonable confidence of where these lines are located or being able to locate them?
They'll be marked by Tennessee One Call prior to construction, and then any crossings or anywhere where they're not confident that they can stay within that tolerance, we've got noted on the plan to pothole that utility to identify it before they try to bore through there. So.
Are they typically the same depth, more or less, that you'll be boring, or do you know?
It would just depend. I mean, the town of Farragut has asked that this be, I think, 36 inches below grade. I'm not sure if they've done the same requirement for the gas lines to be below trees. Normally, they would not be that deep, but I'm assuming they were subject to the same rules, so they very well may be.
What's the time frame for this work?
They would like to start as soon as possible. Their original goal was to be in prior to school starting, but obviously they're.
So school is in session, so it probably would
That's
not
right.
be good if you hit a gas line, probably.
That would be a bad day for everybody involved.
How is this going to impact, and I hate to ask it,
Yeah.
traffic?
Yeah, that
for
was-
the
that was my
schools?
question.
Because there's a lot of people right now dropping off and picking up, and it's a little complicated right now.
Right. My understanding is that the traffic control is coordinated during right-of-way permitting. So if the town wanted to implement, outside of peak hour work hours, I think that would be agreeable.
Can that be coordinated, please?
Yeah, I mean, we can, yeah.
Do I need to add that as a subject too?
You can be more specific with that, number one, if you want, and I can.
Control with outside of peak hours, peak school hours. Does everyone know what that means?
I just started to say, do you need to be specific with the time on that?
Well, I would want to reach out to the principals to make sure I understand what that is, because I'm not on campus, but I would like to know what that is. So per principal's input.
Do you know who the contractor will be, Adam?
I believe it will be Source Broadband.
Who?
Source Broadband.
source?
Yes, sir.
You have a contact there?
I do.
We'd like to have that in case, okay?
Sure thing. I don't have it offhand, but would you like me to send that to Mark or?
Yeah, you
Mark or
can,
Darryl?
and I can get it to
Yeah, okay.
engineering. That's fine.
So you got my added language? So I'm going to make a motion to approve with the amended number 1.
A second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a re-subdivision plat for the Mary Smith property, parcel 079, tax map 142, 328 Boeing Road, zone R-2, 4 lots, 17.83 acres, Lemay and Associates applicant.
This is a piece of property that's been before you all a couple of times in the past couple of years. Most recently, the 2 lots on the right side of the screen, lots 2 and 3, were platted, and then the remainder of the property was 15 acres of one lot. Now they're taking that 15 acres and dividing that into 4 lots. So they are requesting a variance from the 10% open space requirement that's associated with subdivisions in our subdivision regulations. So we'll need to take action on that variance request before we take action on the plat. The pedestrian facility would need to be constructed along Boring Road as part of this project, not along East Fox Den. There's no pedestrian facilities along East Fox Den or anywhere near there, and it's a local street, whereas Boring Road is a collector street that does require a facility. In terms of the variance, the staff does recommend approval of the variance from the 10% open space because of the number of lots involved in this subdivision, which basically is 4 lots, and the fact that all the lots are over 3.5 acres. So they kind of by design have private open space associated with them. So if y'all have any questions on that variance, then I could try to answer that, or Richard.
Separately and first?
Yes.
Yeah, if you don't mind to do that one first.
Motion to approve variance from the 10% open space requirement.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And in terms of the plat itself, the staff recommends approval, subject to 7 comments, and all those are pretty much just housekeeping items, at least from the staff's perspective. And we recommend approval of the re-subdivision plat, subject to those items being addressed.
Richard, will you tell us who you are?
Yes, I'm Richard Lemay, 10816 Kingston Pike, and I'm the engineer surveyor for the property, and I'm here representing Mr. Ball. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Are you okay with all the subjects?
Yes, we have no problem with those exceptions.
What about that depression?
We will field locate it. I guess the concern about it is when we got the notice to put it on, we just took it off KGIS, so we will field locate that depression and put it on there and dimension it from the property line.
Do we need a determination on that, on those closed contours, Richard?
That'll be up to the owner. He can get it tested. We're just going to assume that I don't think it's a sinkhole, but it shows up as a depression. And until it really affects that lot is so large, and it's probably going to be a single family.
And odds are somebody's not going to build right there up against the road anyway.
That's right. And so right now, it doesn't appear to be a problem, but if it becomes one, then I'm sure whoever purchases that lot will come back with a determination of whether or not that's a sinkhole.
And most importantly, you've disclosed it on the plat, so I
Right.
think you've got it covered. In the past, the walking trail along Boring Road has kind of been a sticking point for the owners. The owners understand that
They understand
walking
they're
trail
gonna
is going to
build
be required as part of this.
Correct. Yes.
Is there already a house on that lot?
Yes. Oh, wait, no, I'm not on the lot with the depression. There's an older house on both those lots, corner lot and the other one.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions for Richard or Mark? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the plat, subject to the 7 items as spelled out by staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Richard. Item number 6, public hearing on amendment to approve site plan for Kingston Pike Village Phase 2, grocery store and retail shops, 115 South Watt Road, Zone PCD, 8 acres, site incorporated applicant.
This item is a follow-up to a workshop discussion that we had back in June. And it deals with the second phase of the planned commercial development that's out at South Watt Road in Kingston Pike. And that's the phase that was approved back in January that involves the grocery store and the 2 retail buildings along Kingston Pike. If you remember in June at the workshop session, the applicant presented some amendments to the site plan for this phase related to an agreement to swap some land between this development and the Little Joe's property on the corner of South Watt and Kingston Pike. And after reviewing those modifications with the Planning Commission, you all actually liked the modifications and were, very supportive of moving forward with that. So they've had, obviously a change in engineers and due to some very unfortunate situation, but basically what they're trying to do now is to go ahead and proceed with the approval of the site plan for Phase 2. They've made some modifications to the Little Joe's. This is the building elevations for the retail buildings along Kingston Pike. These are basically the same elevations that we looked at the workshop session, and the grocery store building, fuel center. Then there's a supplemental set of plans that deal with some changes that are occurring to the Little Joe's property in relation to really this development. And one of the changes that we talked about at the workshop session is they have agreed to remove the existing access onto Kingston Pike. So now you will access Little Joe's either through their development or off of South Watt Road. And that's, from the staff's perspective and probably TDOT's perspective, a very good change to the plans, much safer. Because that existing access is very close to the intersection. And so that's a good change from our perspective. And really, like I said, at the June workshop, the changes that they are proposing seem to be very well received, and the staff does recommend approval of the site plan for Phase 2, subject to working with the project engineer on addressing the 13 subject twos. This is a little bit, we're going to have to, and we are certainly willing and want to work with the engineer that's taken over this project, because they're kind of inherited an awkward situation. So there's some of the plans that they really can't change or don't want to change, and they're just going to have to cross-reference them so that we understand, where the plan sheets people need to look at to find the things that are changing. It really won't affect anything about what you approve. It's just a matter of trying to cross-reference in the overall plan set so that the contractor and the staff understand, what they're supposed to be doing. So with that, we do recommend approval of the site plan subject to those 13 items.
Is the applicant here? Or a representative?
So, yeah.
Good evening. Name's Tim Kirkendall. Address is 245 Birch Street, Blumpville, Tennessee. Here representing the developer.
Does anybody have any questions of either Mark or the applicant representative?
Mark, just for clarity, we're going to have, they're taking out that access point from Kingston Pike into Little Joe's. That's going to be a sidewalk? We're going to continue that sidewalk straight across?
Yeah, there will be a sidewalk that will continue on to South Watt Road.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any issues with the subject twos that we have?
We do not.
So you can whittle these down pretty quickly?
Very, very quickly. Those are pretty minor items.
That's all I got.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience on this one.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on a line of sight evaluation associated with the screenings requirement for outdoor storage and sales related to a site plan for Moses Water Sports, parcel 176.02, tax map 130, 11470 Outlet Drive, zone OD-RE, R, 6.8 acres, urban engineering applicant.
This item was, we looked at the site plan, the overall site plan last month, and conditionally approved it. But one of the items that was outstanding that we asked the applicant to take a closer look at was the screening fence that's required in this zoning district for the outdoor storage and display. And the original fence was 4 feet in height, and there was some question from both the staff and some of the commissioners as to whether that was tall enough, because these boats would be on trailers in the parking lot. So they've done some line of sight analyses from Outlet Drive, looking into the property, taking a 3.5 foot eye height, basically from a car level, which is pretty much a standard, to about an overall boat height of 9.5 feet. And what they found with these 3 diagrams was that a screen fence would need to be in a range of from a low of 6 feet 7 inches to a high of 7 feet 10 inches in order to properly screen the material in the parking lot. So they're proposing an 8-foot screen fence that would be constructed of wood colored to match the dark bronze that's on the storefront. There would be intermittent wood posts, roughly about 8 feet apart, and then some anchor posts that would be roughly 50 feet apart at about 16 inches in width. And those would be covered in a veneer of brick that would match the brick on the building. So this is similar to what they proposed last month, except 4 feet taller, basically. A little bit more structural considerations, obviously, with the taller fence. So the architect and the engineer have worked through that, I think, and that's what they're proposing at this time. The staff does recommend approval of this. Just to give you the language of the ordinance, it basically says, in this zoning district at least, that the outdoor storage and sales shall be screened from public rights-of-ways with opaque materials that are architecturally compatible with the primary materials used on the building they are serving. So we feel that they have met that language with this proposal. Just to show you where that area is, it's the yellow line there, and there'll be a gate into the storage area that will basically be 8 feet in height, I believe, and it will screen that area from, if you're kind of looking at it from the west, from the northwest, looking into the property. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, Mark, on those brick structures, every 50 feet,
Yep.
do they require some sort of footer? If so, what?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know if Chris, if you know that or not.
They will require a footing. We'll need to coordinate with the architect,
Okay.
with his structural engineer. But yeah, I'm sure something that large will require a footing.
Okay. We probably need to know that in the future.
Chris, tell us who you are and give us an address.
Apologies. Chris Sharp, Urban Engineering, 11852 Kingston Pike.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions of Chris? Ready for a motion?
I move to approve.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris.
I think one thing we might want to look at in the future is, whether y'all are comfortable with, products like that being stored outside in these zoning districts, whether it's this one or the C2 zoning district in the interstate, whether it's cars or whatever, RVs, trailers, boats, and that might be something to, look at our language and see if you think it's what we want, and it achieves what we want to see in that part of the town. So just mentioning that.
I think you know my feeling on that I'm very much into looking into that. Move on to item number 8, discussion on a concept for outdoor storage and display of farm implements and lawn care equipment on the property at 13127 Kingston Pike in association with Ag Pro, formerly Farragut Lawn and Tractor at 11113 Kingston Pike, Zone C-1, Stuart Ritchie, applicant.
This is actually just being presented to you all, kind of a very preliminary feedback before a site plan is presented. We looked at this at the staff developer meeting on August the 3rd. But basically, Ag Pro has bought the Farragut Lawn and Tractor business, kind of over in the Dixie Lee Junction area. And they are wanting to expand the business. And as part of that, been trying to purchase the property to the east with apparently no luck, to basically store additional merchandise there and provide for a parking area for their employees so that there's more customer parking on the actual property. So what they're showing here with this revised concept, it's a little bit different than what was presented at the staff developer meeting, is basically the storage area in the back, fenced in. Then there would be a sidewalk connection from the parking lot at the Ag Pro business over to the employee parking that would be on the property to the east that they are proposing to lease. And one of the things that we've talked with them about is, we need to understand the specifics of the lease agreement, because we want to make sure that the property owner that's leasing this land understands that what that means in terms of using those buildings or other parts of the site, because these buildings I don't believe are being used by the applicant at this time. They might be trying to work out something to use one of them. I'm not sure where that stands, but my understanding is they're not being used at this time. So that would be something we would need to look at. Obviously, a site plan is going to be more detailed, but they do appear to have addressed the comments that we had initially. They're not showing display in the front part of the property. It's just storage in the back. They could maybe do display in the future, but they would have to go through a text amendment request, and if the community wanted to provide for that, because the current language, which we amended just a few months ago, basically restricts display to being within 50 feet of the building, which that would not be, the building being the business, Ag Pro business. So, and then the parking lot to the east, it would now be compliant. It appears to would meet the setbacks and requirements of the town. And the access is existing off of Kingston Pike. So that's kind of a summary. I think the applicant was just, before they moved too far down the road, they wanted to get your all's feedback. It's a little bit different concept because it's kind of leasing property. But they've tried to buy it, and apparently they have not been successful. So this is what they're requesting. Does anybody have any questions for me? The owner is here, Stuart Ritchie, if you have any questions for him.
What eventually are we approving? I know this is just for discussion, but what are we eventually approving?
Eventually, we would approve a site plan because they'll have to have a paved area for storing their merchandise and for the parking. They would have to meet our requirements in the parking and loading section of our zoning ordinance, and the fence detail. And obviously, part of that's going to be stormwater considerations. How are you detaining the stormwater, because you got more hard surface out there with this, and then just converting some of the existing hard surface areas to grass, kind of in the area where they did show display, just to the north of the sidewalk that goes over to the employee parking area. So, kind of a landscaping plan for that. It'd be kind of a simple, scaled-down site plan, but it would still involve, stormwater erosion control, some landscaping, and just a general site plan. Don't believe there would be more than an acre. I don't know if Annette, if you know, they wouldn't need a notice of coverage, would they? Don't know yet. Okay. If they need that, they'll now have to have the erosion control sheets, the 3 different phases for erosion control. But
Well, we also need screen fencing.
yeah, that would be one of the elements for the detail sheets. Yeah.
What would it need to be architecturally compatible with down there?
Yeah.
I mean, let's set the bar a little higher.
Be something that you might
They
want
can place
to
the
talk
fence in
with.
front of the
Right,
building?
yeah.
Yeah.
15 feet.
Screen the building out.
That's a good question. I think they need to present something, and we'll give them some feedback, because I'm not sure what is a good answer for that.
Stuart, I'd like to be the first to welcome you to our community.
Thank you.
We're glad that you're here. We look forward to you selling lots of tractors in the town of Farragut and contributing to our sales tax revenue.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what the goal is of your expansion and with this particular facility, and we can start some discussion.
Great. I'm sorry.
We need your name and an address.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Stuart Ritchie with AgPro Companies. Our address is 13131 Kingston Pike. Thank you, Mr. Myers. We're extremely happy to be here. We purchased Farragut Lawn and Tractor in June of this year, and that business was doing somewhere between $1.5 million to $2 million on an annual basis. It is our intention over the next 36 months to have that business at $10 million, and within 60 months be somewhere in the $14 to $15 million business. So we do anticipate bringing a greater stream of revenue for sales tax to the county and to the town. We are AgPro is the United States' largest John Deere, privately owned John Deere dealership in the nation. We range from the tip of northern Ohio through the panhandle of Florida. And we primarily here in the community, the Farragut community, will be selling residential lawnmowers, very small tractors for estate owners, serve commercial landscapers. This is not at all a agricultural dealership, doesn't align with the demographics of the community.
Tell us about your needs with merchandise and your storage facility and.
Yeah, yes, sir. Unfortunately, the current facility does not have enough room for us to maintain the inventory that it would require us to get to the $10 million mark. We will be unable to do that in the facility
as it is. And unfortunately, our overhead structure is not the same as what the previous owners was. And so we need to be in that $8 to $10 million to return on the investment to the ownership group. So by allowing us to use the facility or the proposed plot behind the fence, it will allow us to store more inventory and allow us a greater capability to deliver faster to the community, so that we anticipate that with the space as outlined above, we will be able to keep enough with regular turns to meet those financial requirements.
Are the existing buildings part of the lease?
No, sir, they're not part of the lease at this time.
So when we receive, go ahead.
As is, where is, the buildings are just going to be there and static
Yes, sir.
and maintained whatever they,
Well, we would like to lease those from Mr. Shagrin, but in fairness, we have not told him that we are going forward with the lease, because it's more like the chicken or the egg. If we were to receive permission to move forward with this idea, we then have to work with our engineers to get quotes to see the affordability of improving a piece of property that is not ours. So we would like to possibly lease those buildings at some point, but it's not fair to Mr. Shagrin to negotiate on something we haven't even gotten to the first piece on.
I wish you could just buy it. I'm sure you do too.
Yes, sir.
So the site plan that we might see, does that include the whole property or just within the fence? Or,
Well,
in other words, will the parking lot out front be upgraded because it's kind of
Yes,
half
sir.
gravel and half?
Yes, sir.
20-year-old.
Everything that you see there will be brought into what we're showing on the plan. With the only thing we won't be touching is the buildings.
That's the eyesore.
Yeah.
It'll look better, though.
For one, I'd like to see you be able to use that front area as a display area. And again, I know that's not on the agenda tonight and for later discussion, but it seems like it would make sense. And, as long as there's some continuity between the two properties where it looks cohesively like it's part of your dealership, I think it makes sense.
My question is, the storage of the items that you're selling will be behind the fence, is that,
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
okay, and will not be visible from the street?
No, ma'am.
Do you have an idea what kind of fence you're planning on?
Yes, ma'am. We've talked about one that's similar to the area that they have now. We have now on the former FLT property. It would be a black chain link with some black mesh material going across the front so that you could not see behind it.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? As I've said many times here before, my objection to outdoor display like this is we cover the whole town. Even though zoning may be different and all, if somebody in another section of town where, for instance, closer to Campbell Station or something is interested in doing something with display, then that's a problem for us. And I hate to, as I always say, I hate to open up Pandora's box too much with this sort of thing. But that's my comment. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
We control, the outdoor display is only during business operating
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah,
correct?
right.
They have to bring it all,
Yes,
Undercover.
the display they
Yeah.
do, yeah.
Basically, that's anything in the front yard is just during business hours.
Yeah.
I might want to point out that this actually is the former John Deere dealership. If you go back
Yeah.
long enough,
That's right.
this is what's known locally as the old John Deere dealership. This
that's right.
particular piece of property that we're talking about here.
That front building was the old Farragut Lawn and Tractor.
Yeah, once upon a time.
And if you even go back even longer than that, it was an old gas station.
Yeah.
Sinclair.
That's right. Was it Sinclair?
Kind of a historic building, maybe.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? And like Mark said,
Have we helped?
Giving you enough direction?
Yeah.
Stuart, do you need something else from us?
Yes, ma'am. We would like to move forward with our engineers in developing formal proposals and drawings so that we can begin to, if it's appropriate, you have to forgive me, I'm a rookie to this type of proceeding, but we would like to start reaching out to contractors so that we can start getting bids so that we understand the scope of the work.
I think Stuart's going to need a consensus from this board about what our expectations are with the screening and, how comfortable we would be with, because it's not that it's against the grain, it's just different than what we've ever really approved before. Typically, we have somebody, if an older building, they bring us an older building, and we say, okay, you got to bring all this into compliance to be able to utilize this building, and
They're not utilizing the building.
well, they're not utilizing the building. I think in a perfect world, they'd like to be able to utilize one of the buildings. Maybe the back building, is that?
That's correct. If we get further along and the landlord is agreeable, we would like to, at some point in the future, utilize the back building, bring it up to code, and make it less of an eyesore.
Have you been granted access to that other building? Have you been able to go inside and look around at it yet?
No, sir, we've not been able to get into either one of the buildings.
One thing about this design is that existing front building becomes an albatross. It's an island. You're going to be leasing all around it, except
sir.
for it. And so we're stuck with something that's that needs to be either fixed or torn down.
Yes, sir.
At least the grass would be mowed often, wouldn't it?
Well,
The
yeah.
grass it'll be groomed.
Probably not gonna reflect well on your business.
No.
No, sir, but,
People don't know the difference, so that's not ours.
no, sir, you're correct. However, we believe, at least the local group of AgPro believes so strongly in this part of the county. It is the only county in the United States where we have two operations. I grew up here in Farragut, and I know the people, and I know the opportunity, and we just desperately need this space to make it go, because if we can't get it, we just won't be able to stay, just because of the pure financials. Our ownership group doesn't know East Tennessee, and we've been campaigning now for over a year to try to come to Farragut, and we're excited about being here. It's a great opportunity to be here.
So Ritchie Tractor is now part of the larger
Unfortunately,
national group.
unfortunately, but fortunately,
Fortunately.
yeah.
I guess I'd like to talk about that building some more. I was out there today, and it really is a ramshackle building. It's an abandoned building, let's face it. It's been there empty for 10 years or so. There are large glass panes around the front. I counted 15 panes, 10 of which are broken. There's a couple of doors on that building. They're rotted out on the bottom. The paint is peeling off the outside. I peered through the window. It's peeling off on the inside. Any metal that's on the outside is beginning to rust through. It seems like we ought to have some
Why can't we condemn?
some tools in our town toolbox here to try to impose some requirements to either upgrade that building or to tear it down. I'm not sure what our criteria is, but I guess I'd reach out to the town staff to see what options are available to us to take a look at those.
And here's the careful part of that. How does that screw up what they're trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We start on these proceedings, and that's going to muck them up.
I think the difference to me is they're not asking to reoccupy the building. And so, quite frankly, I think we're making a bad situation a little bit better. It's not perfect. I mean, we would love to see some, I don't know, cute burger joint or something there, but that's not in the cards. So what I see is either we can do nothing, and we've got a building that's going to probably sit there and look just like it does, maybe a little bit worse each year for the next 10 or 20 years, or here's an opportunity at least to do some improvements, and I suspect the tenant is not going to want the paint peeling, so he'll probably put a new fresh coat of paint on and do what he can with an ugly building. But he's not going to want to spend a lot of money on a building that he doesn't occupy, but it does reflect on his business. So, it's not a perfect situation. That's why when I said it's different than what we've dealt with before, but I think it does make a bad situation a little bit better.
I think there should be some sort of a pathway that if the property owner wants to, or if the property owner has our codes look at it and say that this needs to go, then he needs to be able to tear it down. I mean, again, it's now, if it gets surrounded to where he'll have to be able to use at least that parking lot to get stuff out of there if he tears it down, so.
Well, and it would be pretty obtrusive to you if he's tearing down a building when you're trying to conduct your business.
That's correct.
But again, I think what Stuart was saying, it's kind of the chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken. It's complicated.
It is complicated. We've had substantial negotiations with the landlord, but we can't finish and put a bow on it until we get into how much it's going to cost us to improve his property. And so we did not want to go down and spend that money with our engineering firm and the contractors without your blessing to move forward, at least to bring another formal plan before you. Because frankly, it could be so expensive that we can't do that based upon the costs. We believe, while it would be somewhat expensive, it is worth the investment because we plan to be here forever. So, and we'd like to stay where we are now. We've already invested substantial amount of money in the former FLT building and to bring it up to our standards. So,
Mark, is there a way, I share Commissioner Meyer's hope and encouragement that this is at least improving it, but I also share Chairman Holliday's concerns about the issues that we may be creating elsewhere. Is there a way to protect, and I don't know if that's the word I want to use, protect outdoor display to just this area of town, or is there a way that we can look at that so that we're not opening up a can of worms we don't want to open up? Do you
Well, I mean,
see what I'm saying?
the zoning ordinance currently specifies the standards for this particular use, and that was amended several years ago
Yeah.
when the Farragut Lawn and Tractor new building was constructed. So that's when all those initial provisions were put in place for that specific type of use, which this plan on the screen would basically fit that as it's written right now, what they're showing. And so, you know, it's a little bit different because it's specific to this kind of use.
Yep.
And if other uses want to go through a process to request
Well, that's all I
something
mean is
different, then
if-
they can do the same thing or try to go through the same process.
I mean, if we get another lawn and tractor into town.
Yeah, they would fall under the same
Yes.
I think what Louise is saying is would there be, and we've done this, we've had some corridor overlays, and Louise, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that you're trying to say, would it be possible to have a Dixie corridor that maybe has some slightly different
Yeah.
rules and regulations as other C1 zoning? And I'm just throwing that out
I
there, but
agree, yeah.
I'm trying to help move
That's-
along the
Yes,
conversation.
that's what I'm talking about, because we already have the most of that market, the tree, Dixie Lee planting, whatever they are, that's.
The nursery?
Yes, that's outside of Farragut, so that exists, and that's not, I don't think that's going away. So, given that that is kind of giving you that feel in that corridor, is there a way to establish a Dixie Lee corridor so that if we want
We've
lawn and
established
tractor-
other corridors.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it'd be a
It's a
process.
little bit of a
You'd have to-
process.
You'd have to go through, obviously, you all and,
And that's not,
the Board
that
of Mayor and
doesn't
Aldermen.
affect him though, because the ordinance, he's already doing what's in the
Well, not
ordinance.
necessarily, not for I mean, the display on the other property is going to require a text amendment.
If he does that, he's not showing that here.
If he does want to do that,
Yeah,
which
he's
I
not-
think makes sense. But, you know, there may be other issues here that haven't been uncovered until he gets into the engineering of the site.
Okay.
You know, to me, the screening is kind of a big deal. I mean, if you look at, what I wouldn't want Stewart to do is go through and invest a whole lot of money with the engineering and field survey work and topo and locating utilities, and then all of a sudden we say, well, you've got to have a screen like the boat dealership. And then all of a sudden Stewart says, well, I've got, I don't know, 800 feet is my best guess, 800 feet of fencing. And so he's already spent $20,000 or $30,000 spending on engineering documents. That's why I'm saying that we need to try to help guide him on some of these things about what our expectations are, and how we kind of fit it into our ordinances. It's Stewart, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to keep you.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
In between the lanes, because I've been there and I kind of understand you need some objective decisions that are things that you can kind of hang your hat on and make decisions moving forward with just the things you said, engineering and contractors giving you bids and so forth.
That's correct. And we would rather not start the process of investing $20,000, $30,000 on a project we're already anticipating somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 just for the portion that we've shown you, if it's would not be agreeable with the commissioners. So any guidance that you could give us would be greatly appreciated.
One of the things that I keep commenting about with this piece of property, and I've been commenting about it for years and years and years, is the fact that this is an entrance to the town of Farragut. It's like our entrance at Camel Station off of the interstate. It's like our entrance at Watt Road. It's like our entrance coming off of Lovell Road. So I want to see it be comparable with our other entrances too. And
Except that when you look right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
you know, I realize what's on the other side of the street, but
On the other side of
still,
Farragut along the track.
yeah, but still, the sign for the entrance to Farragut is on that side. So, I've said this before, but I've had people tell me that they can tell when they come into the town of Farragut. It's just a cleaner, fresher look. And, I'd like to keep that at this entrance to the town of Farragut too.
Well, and that, I think that can be accomplished still with what they're doing. I mean, they're handling it responsibly. It's, even when we gave the opportunity for Mr. Davis to have that display, it always looked organized. It was always attractively laid out there. I understand your concerns, but I think that right now it's very abandoned and it'll be better cared for and organized looking. It's just you're looking at lawn tractors, not looking at, what else are we going to see there?
Lawn tractors
Yeah.
and small tractors. And,
Yeah.
ma'am, I certainly understand your concern. My family owned a business until November of 19 in our community for the past 25 years called Ritchie Tractor. And we understand that when our customers come into the store, they have an expectation of quality that goes with the brand, but they're also, in fairness, they're used to going to businesses like car dealerships and Lowe's where they're very well organized, they're very clean, they're manicured, they're maintained, have fresh coats of paint. And that is the type of business that we want to run here in Farragut. We believe that the community has a high standard, and we also have a high responsibility to maintain a high standard, and that is our intent.
I'm comfortable with what you have proposed here.
Are y'all comfortable with the fence that Stewart mentioned? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we need to get our codes people to look at the building and act on it.
I think you need to have a conversation with Mr. Ritchie first, please, because that could just stall everything.
My opinion is we do not have a final agreement between the landlord, and I'm certainly not going to speak for what he would do, but I'm very concerned that if you all got involved on the building today, that deal's over, and 24 months from now, we'll be gone somewhere else.
I think we need to take take it a step at a time.
Yes.
Let's get this moving along, understand what we're trying to accomplish here, and then work on that, because maybe once you guys are in, the landlord will become a little bit more agreeable about the appearance of that building and the maintenance of it.
Yes, ma'am. And if we are able to get to this first step, our intent is to pursue the other buildings, and then we would also then make the financial commitment to make that back building look completely different, and then negotiate with him as to whether he'd be willing to let us tear it down at our expense, which we're willing to do. But we've got to get the cart before the horse.
Yep.
Stuart, if I were in your shoes, there's the elephant in the room to me was a word that Mark Shipley said in his introduction, and that is stormwater. Now, I think you're definitely going to want to sit down and get your arms around what the expectations are from staff with stormwater, because to me, that's maybe your biggest budget item.
Okay.
It's hard. The stormwater is not the fun and exciting things when we're looking at a site plan. You've got to go a few sheets back, and then you start looking into it. And so I think that's where I would really want to spend some time, because the other items may pale in cost to whatever stormwater expectations the town's going to have to be able to get you to utilize what's there. Then you may get some credit for some impervious surface that's already there, because you're taking some impervious surface out and putting grass in.
Correct.
Maybe adding a little, but that's something I would definitely want to spend some time on understanding.
We are concerned with that as well, and which is why we want to understand from a scope financially what we're facing. So once we have guidance from you all, whether it's okay to take the next step, we'll be sitting down with our engineering firm so we can get our heads around that pretty quickly.
Okay.
I'd like to see this, better being the enemy of good, and I think this is good.
I think so too.
It's a step.
I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments by anybody? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Thank you.
Item number 9, discussion on request to consider a concept of a single-family subdivision and commercial development on parcel 8.01, parcel 9, and parcel 10.02, tax map 152, north and west of the Dollar General Store at 12403 Kingston Pike, zone R-1, R-2, and C-1, 14.5 acres. Kaylee Patterson, BHNP applicant, and this item is also for discussion purposes only tonight.
And I do have 2 citizens that have signed up to speak whenever you're ready for that. But this is another one where the applicant wanted to get some preliminary feedback from the Planning Commission and the community on what they're proposing. This one involves a small subdivision that would be constructed off of Champions Point, which is a road in Foxden, and that subdivision would back up to lots that are in Foxden. The property is a total of 14.5 acres and is 3 parcels. Along Kingston Pike, about 200 feet back, the property's zoned general commercial. And then it's mostly R2, general single family, where the subdivision is proposed. There's a small section at the western end of the cul-de-sac that's currently zoned R1. And that's proposed to be an open space lot in this layout and a stormwater detention area. Like I said, they wanted to get some feedback. There's some variances that they would be requesting ultimately through the Planning Commission. One would be the length of the cul-de-sac. It is more than 500 feet in length. All the lots, I would say, are over 20,000 square feet, which is 5,000 square feet larger than the minimum lot size in R2. So they're relatively large lots. They're larger than they would have to be by that zoning. They're proposing they would need the variance on the cul-de-sac length and the variance to not have a vehicular connection between the residential and the commercial part of the development. In other words, more than one way in and out. This does have far fewer than 30 lots, and it involves commercial and residential properties. So from a staff's perspective, we see the logic in their request for a variance in the case of this context and what they're proposing. And then there's a vehicular connection proposed, an access proposed on the west end, kind of in the curve, right in, right out, just west of the westernmost building on Kingston Pike. And that would need a variance request from the driveways and other access ways ordinance because it's within 400 feet of an existing access into the Little Turkey Creek Commons development on the south side of Kingston Pike. So that's something that we've posed a question at the staff level if they could line those up, but they both are right in, right out movements. And there's probably a good reason for where they're showing it, I'm sure. Probably has better sight distance, I'm not sure, maybe topography. But anyway, that would be something that they would be looking at a variance on. And then to lessen the width of improvements, they would be requesting a variance in the street width from 26 feet to 24 feet for the cul-de-sac street, which the staff supports that. That would lessen the amount of pavement in the development and free up 2 feet of additional kind of buffer space within which they could hopefully, save more trees and lessen the impact to Fox Den subdivision to the north. So with this project, they would be extending the walking trail that was constructed along the frontage of the Dollar General store all the way along Kingston Pike frontage to the end of their property. So that would be a huge connection. A lot of internal sidewalk sections. Some of those may need to be a little better connected. There's a couple of staff comments on those, but we can work with the engineers on that kind of stuff with the site plan and the subdivision plat when that comes before you all. They also would be tying into a walking trail that was required when Dollar General was constructed over, let's see if I can use this. And this was the walking trail there was a trail constructed along the frontage of Dollar General, and then there was one that stubbed to the north, with the idea that whenever that property to the north develops, they would extend that walking trail down to Champions. And that's what they're proposing to do with this development. Another thing that would happen here is that Dollar General would now have access to a traffic signal, which is a good thing. It would be a little circuitous. You come in here and go due north, due west, and due south down to the traffic signal. But it's a connection. The buildings are brought up closer to the street with the parking to the side and the back. So that's not something we necessarily require, but that's something that they've are wanting to do in this case, and we kind of like the look of that. I think that would be a nice look for that section of town. So that's kind of a summary of what they're proposing. They really just wanted to get your all's feelings, the community's feedback on this before they move forward with more extensive design plans, because they'll need obviously a subdivision plat and a site plan for this overall development. But there's a buffer strip between the commercial and the residential, 35 foot through that section, and it actually goes down here all the way back through there, and that'll be planted in existing material or a combination thereof.
I applaud the applicant for being able to try to work with that. I've always wondered with that strange kind of 200-foot deep zoning that runs along that property, how somebody's going to get creative enough to be able to design something. And it was, I know it was tough to design that. And I like the buildings coming up towards the road. And I think there's, it works with the existing signalized intersection, the right in, right out. It makes sense. Obviously, got to figure out line of sight and make sure all the topography and the curve all works well there. But the connectivity, pedestrian connectivity makes sense. I think there's a lot to like here.
Mark, could you show on the map where the connection from Dollar General into the parking lot? Is that
Yeah.
Right there.
You're talking about the vehicular right here.
right? Okay.
Yeah, we stubbed it to the west when that was developed, and obviously the intention was to continue that on in some manner. Reason they didn't continue it at the time is they didn't really know how they were wanting to develop that property to the west.
Okay.
And so now that they're doing that, well, you would have access to the signalized intersection, which is very helpful for definitely if you're trying to get out of there and going back east, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
Mark, on the western right in, right out,
Yeah.
am I seeing a deceleration lane on the right turn in?
Yes.
I mean, it looked like
Yes.
it's just small print.
The town engineers looked at that, and I believe he was okay with that. The comment we had was to try to make that more pronounced on the initial submittal so that it really dissuaded somebody from, somebody going eastbound trying to make a ridiculous turn in there.
I just
which
worry about the
some
sight distance
idiot's
coming
probably
around that
gonna
curve.
do
I mean,
that, but
if you had a deceleration lane there, you can get them out of the mainstream
Yeah.
of traffic.
at least they're out of the flow of traffic. Yeah.
Yeah, that curb would have to be high enough to make a deterrent to where you wouldn't have,
The curve
Same
and
thing
the-
happening that you have at
The angle
Waggles.
of the terminus of it and the curve
And
and
every
the
other-
height of the curve.
yeah.
I think every year our right in, right out designs get slightly better. We've learned what
Yes.
really doesn't work, and each rendition that we do gets a little bit better. I think this is
Yeah, I agree.
This one has they would be tough to be able to make that turn. Like you said, Mark, stupid people do stupid things.
Yeah.
But I think I think it makes sense, and obviously this is still conceptual. And so there's, a lot of design to go into it. I mean, that decel lane's probably end up being about 150 feet long by the time it's done. And you probably need that with, cars coming around that curve going 50 or 60 miles an hour, even though it's a 45-mile-an-hour zone.
There was no fatality in that area years ago.
And we could hear from the applicant. You tell us your name.
Thank
and-
you. My name is Roddy Phillips. I represent the developer
We need an
on this
address.
project. Address is 150 Major Reynolds Place.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Meyer stole my thunder a lot when he was talking about how we designed the commercial. And we feel that while this project may be certainly unique, that there's a certain set of components that go along with this that make it, for lack of a better word, kind of cool. And that's one of those components, Mr. Myers, is the fact that we looked at that and really, when we designed it initially to push the buildings back, and I'm thinking about, from my perspective, driving down Kingston Pike and what it looks like to see a sea of cars and parking lots, and really truly what we wanted to do is something a little bit different that gives you more of a town feel here, is to be able to push those businesses up and push the parking around the back, and honestly, I think it's given us a very cool initial look there. We do have, as pointed out by Mr. Shipley, we do have two different zoning regulations that we're dealing with here with commercial and residential. And one of the things we thought that would be best in this situation is not to fight that. Let's go along with that and see exactly what we can create back there because of that. And I think there's roughly 6 acres or so back there that's dedicated to residential. And instead of trying to cram in a bunch of lots, we realize that there's some natural beauty back there. There's some mature trees. Like Mr. Shipley said, you're looking at 20 to 22,000 square foot lots. Realizing fully well that even with a multi-level house, I'd say with yard and all, you're probably going to only see about 8,000 square foot of actual yard and driveway and if that much. But what those large size lots give us is the ability to maintain a lot of that tree cover that's in there and not touch it and let it be as, buffer. And another reason that Mark had mentioned that we were asking for a different, 2 feet makes a difference when you're building a road that might keep me away from an oak. There are several large nice oaks that we'd like to work around when we build the road out through there and try to keep as much of that stuff there as possible.
Some residents that want to
Yeah, I
speak
do
as well.
have two, if you're ready for them.
Go ahead.
The first one was Stacy Walters. After her, it's Gary Malden.
Gary, if you'll go ahead and get back up there and.
All right, my name is Stacy Walters. I live at 124 Champions Point. I think my first point is I would like to have a better understanding of how a new subdivision like this one could connect to an already existing subdivision like Fox Den. If you look at that map where the residential road will come out, our house is directly opposite, exactly where that red dot is. And so, for example, we pay HOA fees to maintain the front of our neighborhood. If this neighborhood is going to be using that entrance, for example, will their HOA fees also go to support that front entrance? But more importantly, the issue that my family has is we have significant safety concerns about where that road is proposed to come out in front of our house. And if any of you have not been there, I would encourage you to come drive that road, specifically drive it from St. Andrews down Champions Point to the intersection of North Fox Den. The problem with that area is by North Fox Den, you have a very tight curve, which can be dangerous when people speed, and people speed there all the time. More significantly, there is a blind hill that would be to the north up there. Our firsthand experience with that hill is, we walked our children back from the bus stop every day, specifically because it was such a dangerous hill. And you cannot see cars that are coming over, and they can't see you. And so we would have to walk on the other side of the street with our children and have them be prepared to jump into the neighbor's yard in case a car came. I am not a planner, so I am not really sure how this could be accomplished. But if there was any way that the entrance to that subdivision could be moved down a little bit so that it's more opposite our driveway, for example, or the more flat area to where our yard starts across the road. And the reason why is because as cars go really fast over that hill, where that proposed entrance is, they're not going to see cars pulling in and out of that entrance. And the people going in and out of that subdivision are not going to be able to see the cars pulling out either. Again, from a firsthand perspective, we pull out of our driveway every day. We have a child that has a learner's permit, 2 more on the way. And when you make a left out of that driveway, you better be sure that no one's coming, and you better, push the gas pedal pretty hard because people do fly over that hill. And so that's our main concern. I know that there was a quick survey. I'm sorry, I don't know what the right word is, but an engineer came out and looked at that area. Thank you. And determined that based on 25 miles per hour, someone coming up over that hill, that did not cause a line of sight issue. I can tell you, people don't drive 25 miles an hour down that hill. And I invite you to come sit with me on my front porch and watch them speed down that hill. So I want this group to know that we're not opposed to the development itself. And we appreciate how they've tried to protect the integrity of the woods because the trees back there are mature. They're incredibly beautiful. But it poses a significant safety concern as that is designed right now. And so I would just ask this group to reconsider how that could be rerouted so that it's more safe. And also, if you have not driven that road, come out and experience it yourself. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit to Ms. Walters' points, it really is a dip. You come down, you go through a dip, and then you come back up, and then you come down, and Mrs. Walters' house is right there. So there is when you drive it, you realize there's a concern there.
My name is Gary Malden. I live at 323 St. Andrews Drive. I'm a degreed civil engineer. I worked 35 years in the engineering profession. I am opposed to the access point for this subdivision being on Champions Point. Champions Point is approximately a quarter of a mile long, runs from St. Andrews to North Fox Den, short road. In that short street, there are 2 blind curves and 2 blind hills. There's already heavy traffic on Champions Point because the people in the already approved subdivisions along Everett Road come down Everett, go St. Andrews and Champions Point to cut through and miss Kingston Pike. So it's already very heavily trafficked. Champions Point is a school bus route. Let me repeat that. Champions Point is a school bus route. The access point, as was mentioned just a second ago, is on a blind hill. I brought photos if anybody's interested in seeing it. The curve that was mentioned near North Fox Den has seen several incidents where people have run off of that curve and created property damage on that gentleman's property that's there on that corner. I've also personally had incidents, both pedestrian and vehicular, in that curve. So according to the plot plan, it seems to me there's ample opportunity to bring access into that subdivision off of Kingston Pike. There's a regulated traffic signal there to provide safety, and there is absolutely no need and no justification to bring that traffic out onto an already dangerous neighborhood street. I've got photos looking all directions. If anybody's interested in seeing those, send my presentation in case anybody has any questions or comments.
Thank you. If you'll
I do
give
have
those
one.
photos to Mr. Meyer there,
And I
and he
wrote
can
on
pass
the-
them down.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I wrote on the back what they are and which direction they face.
And I have one more speaker that just signed up.
Okay.
And that's Heather Howard.
Yes. I'm Heather Howard at 220 St. Andrews Drive. I'm also a member of the Architectural Review Board for Fox Den.
Pull that mic down just a little bit, if you don't mind. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Good.
I echo the sentiment that the 2 speakers before me said. My problem with the development is the entrance into the subdivision from an already existing subdivision. Part of my problem with that is all the dangers that were already mentioned about Champions Point. I've walked that road with my kids, and we can't follow the normal rule where you walk with the flow of traffic because the hill is so steep. You have to walk on the opposite side so the cars see you going up the hill, or you're going to get flattened with the cars behind you coming down that hill. I've seen the property damage that they speak of. When the cars get to the bottom of that hill, don't stop and run into the guy's mailbox and his lamppost at the bottom of that hill. So that's not a good entrance for that subdivision. Furthermore, part of the problem I have with it is the fact that it's an entrance into a subdivision inside of an already existent subdivision. It creates the streets within the existing subdivision into an access road. And as has been previously mentioned, we have enough trouble with people cutting through that subdivision, cutting through Champions Point, to get to Everett on the other side. We don't need more cut-through traffic in our neighborhood to access this subdivision. And then the other problems I have with it, and this is speaking from
the Architectural Review Board side of things. If it's within our subdivision, because technically it would be within our subdivision, I would think that it would have to comport to the rules and regulations of our subdivision. Granted, it's not a part of Fox 10, I understand that. But some of the variances they're asking about, like making the street narrower, one of the things that makes subdivisions attractive are the wide streets, the wide walkable streets. And they're talking about narrowing the street by 2 feet. They're talking about shortening the cul-de-sac. We have a lot of cul-de-sacs in Fox 10. None of them are that long. So it's not going to be in keeping with the subdivision and the development that is already in existence, that is already there. So that's another problem I have with it. I agree that if they want access off of Kingston Pike, make it independent, make it separate from Fox 10, give them access from Kingston Pike, but do not bring it into our subdivision. Questions?
Is that the last of your speakers?
That was the last speaker, yeah.
Okay.
That's-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Have you discussed, I mean, this is really none of my business, but there's one more lot that's residential. There's another lot, residential and commercial in the front. It's about 1.5 acres of it is residential, zoned resident, R2, I think.
Yeah.
Have you discussed with them if you,
We would love to, but I don't think those folks are willing to sell that.
okay.
What?
I don't think those folks are willing to sell that parcel. We would love to potentially buy it if we could figure something out. One thing I would point out, and I certainly hear and understand the concerns, and again, tonight we're obviously looking for feedback. We're not asking you guys to vote on anything tonight, I don't believe, and we're much like Ritchie Tractor before us. We're trying to figure out where we're at before I go spend a bunch more engineering dollars with these folks sitting right here. But if I may, one of the things that I'm hearing from the folks that spoke is that traffic's a concern there now, with or without the subdivision in there. It's probably, if you ask a traffic engineer, and a lot of times what I hear people say is that you don't even look at traffic studies until you get up to 50, 60 lots. And so I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think a lot of times they're going to say, 12 lots isn't going to add any appreciable trips to anything. But even if it did, one thing I would say is that we've still got some engineering details that we need to work through with Mark and his staff, and we look forward to doing that, and certainly feel like we're going to be successful doing that. And if we need to go up there, Mark, and I don't know if we need to get Knox County involved, and the developer needs to contribute to some sort of traffic calming devices along Champions Point, then if that helps the problem and helps people, I don't see any reason why we couldn't at least figure something like that out.
I'm just make an observation. If I was in Fox 10 and as bad as the traffic has gotten on Kingston Pike, I've actually seen it backed up all the way almost to Fox 10. A lot of that has to do with Virtue Road being closing. But I mean, I would love to be able to have vehicular access out to the signalized intersection. Again, that may not, Fox 10 may say absolutely they don't want that, but it seems like to me, I've spent a fair amount of time at Fox 10 at the clubhouse. I don't live in the neighborhood, but and there's a lot of times where it's hard to turn left out of Fox 10, and that would give somebody an alternative at a signalized intersection. Again, that may not fit in your plan, but it sure seems like that would achieve a lot of objectives, especially our objective with vehicular and pedestrian connectivity.
The only concern about that, and I understand what you're saying, is it may be a net loss gain type situation where
you're losing a lot.
Well, no, not necessarily that, but you're going to have as many people cutting through there to get to someplace else as you would, if it wasn't there. And that's one of the things that we talked about initially in trying to maintain that as just a single road, is trying to make that as intimate as possible, where, kids can get out and play on the road. And I feel like if we do bring that connectivity to bear right there, then you're exactly right. There's going to be a lot more usage on that than just the folks that live there.
The only other observation that I had is your main entrance at Old Stage Road, you've got 8 parking spots that are stacked on a 90 next to one of your 8,500 square foot buildings. Those are going to be some tough spots. You're going to want to reevaluate. Again, I know we're talking conceptual here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're going to want to reevaluate those.
That's one of our comments.
Because when you're pulling in and somebody's trying to back out, all of a sudden you got cars stuck with their rear ends out on Kingston Pike.
Yeah,
Again, sounds like staff's already on top of that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we're trying to give you guidance with your plan.
Sure.
Yeah, they'll have to get that back.
Yeah.
You can't have that backing out into that doesn't have near enough stacking if you're going to put parking there.
The other observation that I'll have, and then I'll kind of be quiet and try to let some other folks chime in here. The reality is you guys do own an R2 parcel on a public road.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether we like it or Fox Den likes it or whatever, the reality is you have frontage on a public road that the taxpayers own, and you have rights to use that. Is it the ideal location? And maybe not by looking at the photographs, but the reality is that you do have frontage on that road. We also, there's other places in Fox Den. I mean, for instance, Country Manor, Country Way, Village Green to a certain extent, where some neighborhoods you go through one neighborhood to get to another neighborhood. So that precedent is here in the town of Farragut. Is it a little unusual? Yeah, it's probably a little unusual. It's not, typical, but there are a lot of things here that, and I've driven on that Champions Point, not as a cut through, but I have a friend that actually lives back there, and you're right, it is kind of a funny little road with a heart dog leg, and it goes down to what used to be, I guess, an old cul-de-sac a long time ago, and it does do some of that, and it's definitely not a perfect road, but it is a public right of way.
I do want to say this. When I met with some of the Fox Den HOA representatives to let them know that this was going on, and brought the land use plan to them. And I know this is not ideal for a lot. You probably thought you were just going to have one house in front of you and didn't really expect to see this. But I relayed to the HOA members that I met with. On the land use plan, this is envisioned commercial and then medium density behind it. So what they're developing as R1, because that's really what they're developing, 20,000 square foot lots, in keeping with what is there at Fox Den. The vision on the land use plan is probably R4.
And this is kind of like low density.
Yeah, it's very low density.
This is very low density, so it is very much in keeping with what Fox Den has. In my mind, if you try to, because Noah did make the point, they do have right to access a public road. But if for some reason we manage to change that up and force them to make the entrance through a parking lot, now you're changing the vibe, because no one's going to buy a low-density, very expensive residential home where they have to drive through a commercial parking lot to get to it. So you're changing the feel there, and they could come back and ask for R4. If they can put 31 lots in there, you have an access point. You're required to have a secondary access point, so you still have an access point into Fox Den. Now you have 31 townhomes, you have an entrance onto Kingston Pike, and you have a secondary access point onto Champions Point. So I tried to point that out because they could request R4. It's not a guarantee that they would get R4, but the R1, they're not even asking for R1 OSR, which could have given them 16 lots. So I'm looking at this, understanding that they do have right to access. I do have concerns about the dip, And I wish that you could work with that property owner next there, because I think it would be such an ideal situation. You could bring it out further up. You could have houses that front on Champions Point, which is probably more in keeping with the vibe on that road. But clearly, I can't make you work with that property owner.
We'll work with them. We can't make them sell it to us.
I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it is
Yeah.
only 1.5 acres, but it could make all the difference
I
in,
understand.
in a safety issue,
Yeah.
which I believe is a safety issue. I understand that we're beholden to AASHTO standards, which is how Darrell analyzed line of sight. We had the line of sight analyzed, and you have access. I'd like to see it pushed as far as you can get it. And I would love it if you tried to work with that 1.5 acres, make that a little bit safer, because it is a safety condition to me. So, those are,
Anybody else have any from the planning commission have any questions, comments at this point?
Very well covered.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
10, discussion on a text amendment to the CLUP to evaluate text associated with the medium-density residential land use designation and provide for text associated with the high-density residential land use designation. Town of Farragut applicant. Again, this is for discussion only. Want to give us a minute or two?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
get a minute here to.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's carry that on outside.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started on this. And this is just a workshop discussion. Obviously, a follow-up to some of the stuff we talked about at the workshop. The focus of this item is specifically medium-density residential and high-density residential land uses that are in our comprehensive land use plan. We actually had some amendments that were going to be voted on in March of 2020. That was the last live meeting that we had before the COVID pandemic, and in an effort to try to shorten that meeting, some of the items toward the end of the agenda were postponed. So that never came to fruition, and now we're trying to revisit, really focusing on those two land uses, the existing language that we have for medium density residential, and then to consider new language for the high density residential land use that we created on the map in 2018. If you remember, originally the medium density residential land use, when the plan was updated in 2012, was pretty broad. It was in terms of density, it was 6 to 12 dwelling units per acre, and it included a pretty broad description of potential housing products that might fall under that. And so one thing that we did was, in working with that land use with some rezonings and developments since 2012, was to revisit that range and break it up actually into two different land uses. One would be 6 to 8 dwelling units, and that would be medium density residential. And then 9 to 12 would be a new land use called high density residential. And that would basically include apartment developments like Lanesboro and Overlook apartments for that. So one of the considerations in doing that was that we needed to come up with text to amend the medium density residential text and provide for text related to the high density residential use, since it's now mapped, but there's no text in the plan to correspond to that. So High-density residential, it was created by MAP in 2018, 9 to 12 units per acre. Currently, the only parts of town that are mapped as high-density residential are Lanesboro and the Overlook. We have one other apartment project getting ready to start. That's PCD, and then one in the town center. Since it is an established land use on a map, we really do need to come up with some text and character description for this land use. And one really overriding question here is whether this is a land use that should be specified in any areas outside where it already is mapped. And that's kind of a community discussion, frankly. We kind of heard from some of the people from the community that really didn't want any more of these kind of larger scale apartments. But if we do provide for that, I think we need to look at the typical things in the description, maybe the density, the height, footprint, maybe some other characteristics. And if we don't, we really just need to kind of describe that in the plan, that basically what's mapped is what the community wants at this time. And, you know, if they want to provide for that in the future, they'll have to amend the text at that time. So high-density residential, some of the characteristics in terms of what we have mapped right now. You're looking at 9 to 12. Lanesboro is about 9.94 units per acre, and the Overlook's right at 12. The footprints are up to about 15,000 square feet, up to 4 stories. Abutting or having direct access to a major arterial and adjacent to non-residential developments. And that's a big one, adjacent to non-residential developments, because that's been a point of contention with the apartment projects, the ones that have been proposed with rezonings that abutted existing residential communities, like the property to the west. You know, if we were going to look at that land use and try to add some provisions, some things, if the community wanted to, you know, have more specific criteria associated with high-density residential, or what does that really mean? Maybe you up the masonry percentage even higher than it is currently. Maybe you require certain segmentation of the building to break it up into the appearance of being smaller, more house-like looking buildings, as opposed to apartment, larger scale, kind of commercial looking apartments. We showed this slide at the workshop, and it just kind of gives you an idea of some existing developments in the town and what footprint sizes you would have for those, and how they relate in terms of footprint and height to the apartment developments that we have in the lower three, the lower three on that slide. And so some of the footprints for attached single family are actually comparable or even larger in some cases than our apartment buildings, but the height and the roof pitches and all the, you know, architecture of those buildings make them look more residential in scale. So that's something that we would need to think about when we're looking at language for high density residential. Medium density residential, we do have descriptions for that currently in the plan, but staff feels like we need to revisit that and look at it a little bit closer. With medium density residential, we did have a lot more areas of the town mapped for that land use when the plan was updated in 2012. Some of those areas have been developed and the future land use map has changed, like the Harville property off Virtue Road, the Ivy property, the Swan Farm. All those had medium density residential, but they're now different kinds of land uses and different types of development. So just looking at that existing language, the medium density residential, the current character description really kind of includes about any kind of housing you can think of, and it's pretty it's pretty broad from single-family detached to pretty much large-scale apartments, and that was to fit that 6 to 12 dwelling unit range. So really, that character probably needs to be revisited, maybe even embedding some of the missing middle housing options that we looked at earlier. Just to kind of rehash that, that's basically the housing that falls within the range of, you got single-family detached and larger scale multifamily. It's the housing products that kind of fall in between that. And that would include a lot of the townhomes, duplexes, quadplexes, like the cottages at Price Farms. Maybe even small lot single family could fall into that. And so that's something that we could look at. Cottage court that we looked at in the workshop would, to me, potentially fall under the medium density residential. And this would be a kind of a land use from my perspective that could be a really good transitional land use from lower density residential to some kind of non-residential, whether it's office or commercial, or within the mixed-use town center or mixed-use neighborhoods as a transitional component, or even on smaller infill lots that are kind of in areas where it's not practical to have a traditional single-family detached development. It's probably not marketable. Maybe it's near a kind of a commercial area or office area. So that might be an area where medium-density residential might be a good fit. And we looked at these at the workshop too, some of the different housing products that might fall in that medium-density residential range. So I think, like I mentioned at the workshop, to me the real important thing with all these land uses and what we end up doing with the descriptions is, first of all, we need to get a lot of community input, I think, on it, and then really try to think about whether the language creates the vision that the community wants to see. And of course, the language in the plan is going to be much more general. It's not going to have the specifics or any requirements, but it's going to lay out kind of the general vision of what the community sees at that moment in time as what that land use should look like if it gets built on the ground. So that's kind of an overview of this item. I don't know if any of y'all have any questions, observations, or
I'd like to
thoughts. Yep.
I'd like to start a discussion, and I'm probably going to shock some of you with this, but after working on the steering committee back in 2012 with the land use plan and polling a lot of friends in the town of Farragut, I think I am ready to throw in the towel on high density designations, which means the high density apartments and multifamily projects, and I've been an advocate of it. It was a big part of what I believed in and what I believed I heard in 2012 for different choices in housing. But talking to a lot of folks that we hang out with, or we go to church with, or we see at Fox Den, it is absolutely overwhelming how many folks are vehemently opposed to apartments. And so I think I'd like to have some discussion about removing high-density residential as a classification on our land use plan, and see if that's something we'd like to entertain.
Here's,
I was going to say the same thing.
but it exists.
I know it exists.
Well, it does exist.
But the key is, from where I'm coming from, is the fact that, like Noah, we went back and we figured that we needed some variety of the housing in this community. And by golly, we've accommodated that.
Yep.
Big time.
We've got it on North Campbell Station. We've got it on the west end at Watt Road. We have it, really going to be a great development in the town center, I feel.
I think so, too.
People, eliminate the emotion of it, but enough is enough. We already dealt with the,
Yeah.
the Ford property, saying we basically didn't like the way that was done, shoehorned in there. So, I'm willing to say right now exactly what you said.
That's why I wanted to start the discussion, and you guys know where I've stood all these years on this. I've been probably the biggest advocate
when we
for it.
did the Watt
But,
Road,
but I
that
think
was
I think I'm done. I think
But,
the community has told me and
We've
convinced me
satisfied that market.
Yeah.
that they just
Yeah.
don't want any more.
I
And-
agree.
and I'm okay. I'm okay
It's-
with it.
It's very, what we have is very well strategically located throughout the town.
Yep.
We have checked that box, but from my perspective, it is a use in our town currently. We need to define it, we need to stick a pin in it and be done with it. But it is a use in our land that exists. It needs a definition.
Well, we're not talking about it.
No, I'm talking about
eliminating it.
removing it.
I'm not talking about- but-
remove it and put a more,
Yes,
and then
but-
finish the R6s. Say,
Yes,
all right,
it's
no
longer, nothing else is designated high density. It's
Right.
done, we're
It is
done.
what it is.
Yes.
Because I think there's an unbelievable demand for duplexes and townhouses.
Yep.
The cottages, I think it's awesome in concept. I love the idea of this little utopian thing with the green out front, but in reality, I can't, that you got to park 100 yards away from your little cottage
Yeah.
and carry your groceries. As exciting as it looks, I don't think if I were to try to sell that product, I couldn't sell or lease that product. But I could sell and lease townhouses and condos and villas, with medium density. This stuff maybe up to 8 units an acre. I could do that all day long. And I think there's an unbelievable demand for many years to come for it.
I agree. And that's what we're missing.
That's what we really need, and that's what we're not getting.
Just
Yeah.
that middle.
And I agree, keeping it, from my point of view, I don't want to see quadplexes and triplexes. I'm good with single-family attached or detached.
I'm not opposed to quadplex. I mean, if, for instance, the development that is the Swan Farm development, they've got some triplexes in there and some quadplexes in there, and they're very tasteful.
I mean, above.
Oh, okay, you mean
You're talking
going
about
vertical. You're talking about going vertical. Okay, I'm more
But
horizontal.
That's single-family attached.
Yeah.
So that is covered with single-family attached. I don't
Okay.
have a problem with 4 units together.
Okay.
Or whatever. I have a problem with, that's multifamily, when you're putting it above. I don't want to see
I mean, obviously, in
multifamily.
very urban, dense areas, there may be a demand for that. I just don't see that demand being here
I agree.
in my lifetime. I really don't.
I agree. It's very much an urban
Right.
Look
construct.
at the limited property we've got left to develop.
It's already
We need
fulfilled
to-
everywhere else, so,
Yeah.
I mean, Hardin Valley's full of it.
There's plenty of apartments. We've got so many apartments
Done.
we've got a
Check
good
that
10
box.
years of apartment.
We
And
can
again,
check
if we can revisit this, an applicant can bring it to us and say, hey, there's a desperate shortage of apartments 5 or 10 years now. I think it's going to take a long time, and maybe I'm
It'll be
wrong.
after 2024.
But we're not going to say what that date is, are we, Louise? But
Have to be in
nevertheless, I wanted everybody to know, because you kind of know where I've stood all these years on this. I'm ready to take it out and be done with it.
Thank you. I think we're all in agreement with
You got direction, Mark?
You've only heard for a couple of us on this. I mean, and these are big radical changes. I'm talking about taking it out of the land use plan, removing the designation. These are big deals.
Well-
And then I'm also,
No,
it's
you
going
still
to take
have
some
to
more
have
public
that.
outreach.
You have to
And
have
then I'm
the
also talking about
Existing.
moratorium on our, I guess if we take it out of the land use designation, it would be hard for somebody to rezone to it due to the fact that the designation doesn't exist anymore. So maybe you can't
But the
really.
designation does exist. It's there already. We
Right.
have
Well, yeah,
it,
we have to grandfather what's there.
but it still should be shown on the map that
Right.
that's what it is, because realistically, that's what it is. That
Right.
doesn't mean we don't need to designate
It's only on
anything else.
existing properties.
It's
Right,
only on existing
And we have other things
properties.
that have, existing properties, so.
As
I mean,
built,
Right.
part of the
Yeah.
map.
That would need to be in the text, in my opinion, in your plan.
That sounds
Because
good to
then You
me.
could just say that this reflects existing developments and their character and,
That's- I
that
think that's-
there's
yeah.
not any more
As-built portion of the map.
that we're providing for. I mean, some community, some board in the future or somebody could change that if they wanted to, I guess. But at this moment in time, that's something we could put in there.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and that way it's very clear, when you look at
Stated,
the
not just
text,
implied.
Yes.
you know, that's it, pretty much. What's either built or getting ready to get built is what you got for that.
Do we have R6 on the comprehensive land use plan that would need to be un-R6'd?
No.
No, it's really,
Oh,
none of the zoning districts are in the CLUP. It's really designations for
Yeah.
what our vision is.
The only high density that's on there is existing, the only high density designation is what is already existing is high density.
I can't think of anything that has that zoning that is not either already has something approved for apartments or already has apartments
That's
there.
right. That's
So I
true.
think the reality is that I don't think there's, I could be wrong. Staff might find some parcel that I'm not aware of.
No, that's right.
That has it, but I just think, I think it's
When we
time.
created
I think it's
that land
time.
use,
I mean,
we
gosh,
just-
all of us have lost sleep on. I mean, my wife made me get off of social media because of the nightmares of it. She goes, "That's it. Turn off your next door. I'm canceling it." And so, anyway, I think that the public has spoken, and I think it's enough's enough.
So let's move on to medium
Again,
density. 'cause that's-
You've got direction on that, right?
I got direction on high
Okay.
density, yeah, I
Great.
think I
Yes.
got good direction on that.
I didn't leave it very vague, did I, Mark?
That's good, that makes my job
Right,
easier.
it makes your job easier. Let's talk about medium density.
I like what you've written here about the characteristics. I would like some kind of, and you make a very good point. My concern is when we go to 6 to 8 units per acre, that could get ugly real fast, and there's no coming back from that. One of the things I would like to see as a point in medium density is, one of the aspects of being able to go to that density is that you're providing some kind of, I don't know another way to put it, community engaging aspect that you might not necessarily see, like this, they're brought up to the street, or there's a common area of shared common space, although I kind of agree with you, Noah, that's nice in vacation land when you have your cottages and you have that shared open space, but nobody wants to live like that because they want their driveway and their garage and all that stuff. But I think we need to make it clear that there's something needs to be an added extra benefit to doing medium density.
Okay, yeah, I understand, yeah.
Most of your cottage deals that you see now are golf cart related.
Yeah.
And they use golf carts to ferry their groceries to their cottage. And I think some of the retirement villages you see that way, and that's common, but that's not here. We don't fit
Yeah, I
that.
mean,
I don't want to
it's just
preclude somebody from doing it. I'm just saying, I just don't think it's marketable today.
I think, and you made a good point, Shannon, about the density. That first sentence probably ought to say density of between 5 to 8 units per acre. So you got a range, because in the plan, it talks about if you're looking at a range, you start with the lowest, and then you work your way up. Because it caps off at 4 right now with the next lowest.
Well, then naturally, it should be 5 days.
So 5.
I mean, that's the range.
Yeah, I think that's something that was a good suggestion. And that would make it more clear and give you some starting point if somebody's trying to rezone, where you would begin. Yeah, I think you make a good point about adding something in there that would capture the benefits of the missing middle stuff that we talked about at the workshop. And I don't know, without getting too prescriptive, which the plan's not really supposed to be, that's more of in your ordinances.
Yeah.
You need to try to think about the general idea of what you're trying to accomplish in a medium-density residential land use that would guide you, to the more, developed restriction or provisions that would make that happen on the ground. So I can look into that a little bit more and see if there's a couple of points that could be added to address that, or if you all think of anything that you would want to plug in there that would achieve that objective, then send it to me, and I'd be happy to take your feedback on it, because I certainly don't have all the ideas, that's for sure.
I will say this to the Planning Commission. My goal is that we get this adopted in a rather timely manner, because the residents along Boeing Road corridor we need to do a corridor study for them. We need to bring them in, because once we should have really addressed it in 2015 when we redesignated that area for S1 or for the senior living facility, because it left a big spot of medium density between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, and that just didn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense to be bringing medium density all the way back to that Boring Road along right next to Baldwin Park. And of course, I'm looking at the undeveloped land in Village Green, and that really does need to be the same, very low density, the same density as what it's surrounding. They're not going to want those. I'm pretty sure those residents aren't going to want that to be any denser than what is already offered there if it ever develops. So my goal is that we get this medium density, kind of the characteristics and what we'd like to see from it in a very broad sense, so that the residents coming in, they kind of understand the general direction we're trying to go. So if they want medium density up there, knowing that this is kind of what we're angling for. But we really need to get the folks in the Boring Road corridor in and work through this part of the land use plan.
We had a good start tonight, so.
Yeah, because a lot of them did
Yep.
show up. Because this is what we've been talking about they've been through three multifamily applications for rezoning, and it's been very stressful on them. So that's my goal here, is that we kind of try and get through this pretty expeditiously.
Can we schedule another workshop then for the next meeting?
I don't know, do you think we need one, Mark?
I think the people would like for one.
And
once
just
they've had a
focus
chance to
on
talk
that,
with-
focus on that one area?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. I mean, we put a lot of foundation work down tonight for that. And I do think we need to focus in on one area at a time and not overextend ourselves.
Use that as the focus area to flesh out this.
Get the
overall.
vision from the people in that area,
Suggested.
and, whatever that is, we'll figure out what we need to do from that point.
Well, and what I'm saying is, I'd like to do like we did with McPhee corridor and Walt Road corridor. I'd like to
Like
bring
a-
them in to have them.
Like a charrette.
Yes, yeah, so that they can come mark up their maps and,
So that would be a separate meeting?
Yes.
That wouldn't be a meeting before our meeting like tonight. That was, really the purpose of that workshop was just to introduce some
Yeah.
topics and some ideas and observations.
but we can't do that until we have some language around this medium density. They need some understanding of, we need some language adopted around the medium density, because this is very general. This is not a zoning ordinance, it's a land use designation.
I don't think, I think them being involved in any kind of comprehensive land use discussion we have is a good thing.
Yes.
They were with the other areas that we covered, and I think we need to continue on and be consistent with that.
Oh, I agree, that's what I'm suggesting, but
Okay.
if we don't have language, a medium density land use designation language adopted first, and certainly whenever we have that, we'll have the opportunity for community input to help us with that
What you're saying is we
language.
need a draft of something as a starting point for the discussion, as opposed to plunge in just a discussion.
Yeah, we can't do the corridor study without language for a medium density residential land use designation. I'm calling for the community to be part of that discussion, to solidify this language so that we can get the Boring Road corridor study done. But we can't do it without some kind of, I'm not saying that we do this, I'm saying that but that's been done through workshops and through this process here.
So basically, what we need to do is Mark come up with.
Proposed language. Yep.
Yeah, a broad outline, really, of
We
what.
need more direction to him now.
Right.
And you can see how it applies and when you're
Yeah.
dealing with the.
Taking
the
that and just kind of manipulating it a little bit, is that what you're talking about?
Right, and then
Present that next time, and then
Yep.
from there, go
to
out with
the
the
application
charrettes
of it.
and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's what y'all want, that's fine, we can work on that.
Yeah, that'll keep us on track here.
Okay. Are we through with that?
It's up to you all if y'all are finished with it.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 11, discussion on amendments to the penalty section of Chapter 113, Tree Protection of the Farragut Municipal Code, to increase the penalties for removal of protected trees without permission. And again, this item is for discussion only.
Yeah, this come about really, we've had recently 3 different instances where some trees that fell under the protected tree classification in our tree protection ordinance were removed without approval from the town. And we did assess fines in those cases, but the question is whether the penalties that we have currently in our ordinance are sufficient enough to strongly dissuade people from doing that. I provided a definition in some of the terminology from the ordinance in the packet, which describes what protected trees are, and then what the existing penalties are for removing those without approval from the town. And basically, the stiffest penalty we got right now is if you went out and cut down a 15-inch hardwood tree without any approvals or anything, and on properties that aren't exempt from a tree protection ordinance. So like a single-family dwelling unit, they can cut every tree on their lot if they want to. I'm not sure why they would do that, but it's exempt from the ordinance. But those that aren't exempt from the ordinance, if they did that, they would have to provide 15 caliper inches of replacement trees. And the caliper is just the thickness of the tree 6 inches above the root ball. So, normally that would be some combination of different types of trees, different sizes, maybe 15 1-inch caliper trees that they would either plant back on the subject property, or if they couldn't fit them all on their property, then they would work with the town to figure out where, if there's places on town properties or along walking trails and things like that, that they could provide those. We have a lot of trees in our parks and along many of our greenways that are the result of our tree protection ordinance. It's something that a lot of times a developer doesn't really want to put them back on their property, because that's kind of why they removed them in the first place. They're trying to free up more space to do something else with their property, and they're glad to work with the town to put them on our properties. So that's kind of what they would have to do under the current requirements. And then, of course, we could cite them to court and go through that process too. And there's things that we could do beyond that if we had to, injunctions and stop work orders and withholding building permits, those kinds of things. But what we're proposing, just for discussion purposes again, is to increase that penalty to 4 times instead of 1 time, 4 times the caliper inches. So that's a big increase. So if you got that same 15-inch tree that you cut without approval, you're looking at 60 caliper inches of trees. And that would be a pretty big deterrent. I've got the two of the 3 fines that I've had in the last few years have been well over $10,000 and $18,000. So we take it serious.
And that's not times 4.
We take it serious, and we're glad to work with people, and sometimes you do have to remove trees. Unfortunately, we see that all the time, but if somebody just blatantly goes out and takes them down, especially in areas where it's pretty clear that, they were not supposed to be there, removing the trees, then, that's something that we take pretty serious, so.
And we're not limiting this to cutting trees.
What do you mean?
Well, we're not limiting this to going out and cutting a tree.
On your personal property, it
Oh,
has
no,
nothing to do
no,
with
no.
Like pruning?
no. I'm talking about if a group of trees on your property die, a large
No,
group of
if
trees.
they're dead, yeah, they're exempt from that.
We consider them hazardous.
Right.
And there's also like invasive
Hazardous
species.
tree-
We
yes.
cleaned out, we had some mimosas.
Yeah, and
You know,
those don't
we
fall
cut some
under the-
mimosas down recently. I mean,
right.
because they're an invasive species.
That's right.
One of those trees we don't want.
Yeah,
Well, my pet peeve is whenever they go in and cut a buffer,
yeah.
and then
that's
say,
one of the-
how
that's
much do you
one
want
of
me
the
to write
three
the
that
check
we
for?
had.
Yeah, that's.
That's one of the three ones, and you
Yeah.
know about it.
What usually is their motive? Because they want a grade in the buffer, or I mean,
More visibility.
Visibility.
well, I mean, I've definitely seen it along the I-40 corridor,
Yeah.
where we've got some folks that go out into the right of way and start cutting trees. And there's been a couple of folks over the past couple of years that I've lectured. Top Golf was one, and I don't know if I may have lectured the boat dealer a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But because they'll go out into the right of way and start cutting the trees for the visibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a concern.
What I'm getting at, Mark, is not just from the fact that the trees get cut, but when we had this, a bunch of trees die, where we had somebody who may have come in and killed a
poisoned
bunch of
them.
trees.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a little
that
bit
did
harder to
happen
prove.
once.
Yeah, you're kind of treading on thin ice with that one.
Yeah, you can try to trace it back, I guess, and figure out.
Do you really want to do soil samples and?
I'm going to investigate that.
Well, it's a good
Depends on how
point,
many trees
because,
you're talking about.
Talk about that.
I don't think we're really staffed for that kind of a deep dive.
yeah, I mean, that could
I don't
happen.
think we need to just go down this road. Advertise that people could think about that.
That's,
Don't give me an idea.
yeah, I
So-
hesitate, and please don't.
So we're going to remove. You're proposing removing the $500 fine and just making it 4 times the inches?
Well, the problem with the $500 fine is that's outdated. It needs to be updated. We can't fine them that much anymore.
No, you can't.
What, TCA changed it? Okay.
The state law doesn't allow you to
Okay.
do that.
It's like $50 or something.
So that's
Oh, I
something.
gotcha. I gotcha.
That's something I've been meaning to update for a while, so this was a good opportunity to, and I just referenced whatever the requirements are, provided by local laws. So if that, no matter what that ends up being, you don't have to change the ordinance again, because it just kind of adapts to
Right, we
whatever
just
the local
eliminate
laws
it.
become. So unfortunately, we can only do 50 now per day per violation potentially.
That per tree? $50 per day per tree?
Well, per violation,
So each tree could be a violation, but it's hard to quantify.
I guess you could potentially
I don't
present
know.
it
To
that
me, I
way.
think the quadruple inches is a pretty big stick.
It's a big stick.
Yeah.
Because then you're hunting stumps, okay? That's,
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Well, you're gonna have to hunt stumps anyway with the quadruple inches, but
yeah, get your, how much bore you need.
Yeah, it's a jump in
Yeah.
the penalty. Yeah, that's for sure. So I don't know if y'all are comfortable with that. I'm just presenting it for
I'm very
discussion.
Very
comfortable with that.
comfortable.
Okay. Everybody's comfortable with that? Well, I'll have that ready for an ordinance then next time.
Okay, approval of utilities, we have no utilities.
Have any? No,
Citizens forum, do you have any blue cards? Nope.
Not from anybody that, it's not on the agenda, no.
So the August 19th, 2021 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned.